Up next, we have Micah Daigle. He started as a political organizer. He created the app you might know if you have been to Burning Man called BurnerMap to let your friends know where you're camping. It took 4 weeks from concept to 20,000 users. That's pretty impressive. He's founder of Update Democracy, a movement founded on the belief that our democracy should be built on technology and behavioral science of the 21st century, not the 18th. So here is again Micah Daigle, Upgrade Democracy, the future of collective decision-making and decentralized representation.
Thank you. Awesome. So this is my first bill. I've been wanting to come out to this for a few years. The first year I've made it, and I love it. I mean, this is like, it's like everything I love. It's like Burning Man and like meets TED meets like open source software, like on a boat, which is really cool. So I think, I mean, what draws a lot of us to an event like BIL is that we all believe in the power of collaboration. In kind of an ad hoc, horizontal, non-hierarchical way, right? And a lot of us we love open source technology, we love projects like Wikipedia, we love chaotic but beautiful events like Burning Man. But a lot of us who have been involved in these sorts of projects and communities also realize there's a bit of a dark side to collaboration. We realize that it's often very difficult to make decisions together in groups. Working together sometimes works if the decision has already been clearly defined, but oftentimes there exists this tension, this ongoing tension between inclusivity and effectiveness and efficiency. So between including lots of people in making a decision and making a good decision. This is something that I've dealt with a lot in my life, and living in group houses, in organizing a Burning Man camp, in organizing an international nonprofit organization with thousands of students. And it always came down to this tension where we wanted to be fair, we wanted to invite people into the decision-making process, but it was always so much more difficult the more people that were involved. And this has become, fixing this fundamental human problem has become kind of a mission for me. And what I've realized is that, you know, there's kind of a core principle that I try to organize my work around. It's how can we increase the functional decision-making capacity of organizations, which means that we can make decision-making bodies more inclusive while also making good decisions. Now, how have we as humans figured out how to help that problem? Now, I've found that we've kind of found two ways of helping with that problem. The problem exists in that we max out in our ability to keep lots of information in our heads, right? So one technique that we use is we compress that information into process. So if I was a better prepared speaker like Jamae, I would have slides up here that help to compress some of the ideas that I'm talking about, so that it would be easier to see them, right? So oftentimes, you know, in a facilitative process, when we make decisions together, you have a facilitator, you have a whiteboard, right? And it helps to draw out some of the key points that are being made by people in the room. But even then, you oftentimes just have too many people, the decisions are too complex. And so we use a second technique of compression, but it's not compression of information, it's compression of people. It's representation, right? So we vote and we say, okay, you people make the decision for us. And oftentimes in circumstances like BIL, for instance, we select, or sometimes we don't even have the chance to select, a group of what we call benevolent dictators, right? And the benevolent dictators often work out until they don't. And this was a big problem that a lot of people had with Burning Man this year. Who entered the ticket lottery for Burning Man? Am I the only one here? Yeah. Who got tickets? Yeah. Anima, you got tickets? What the fuck? Okay, so anyway, so the point here is that we often, we cede our power to people who represent us until they stop representing our interests. And the point I want to make today is that both of those methods that we use, compressing both information and compressing people via representation, are out of date. Now, how I came to this was I was a political organizer for 10 years, and I started off in the smallest state in the country, in Rhode Island, small, densely populated state, and we were able to make a huge impact in state-level politics because we had eye-to-eye direct communication with our representatives. Literally, your representative lived down the street from you, and if you could, you not only, I mean, you didn't have to set up a meeting with them, you could see them in the grocery store. So there was this direct form of representation there. Then I moved to DC and worked in politics there and realized that the same reason why democracy worked at a small level in Rhode Island is the same reason why it doesn't work in a place like DC, because ultimately we are all just human beings. And as human beings, we max out in our ability to not only retain information, but also feel empathy for any amount of people beyond, I mean, the science says it's about 150 people. I mean, we can feel a sense of global empathy, right? We're all global citizens, right? But to feel personally, directly accountable to someone, we only have the capacity for about 150 people. So who are those people in DC? Well, if you're Nancy Pelosi, your 150 people are party officials and lobbyists, right? They're not you and me. They're not the people that they should be representing. So this brought me to an idea that, you know, a lot of people have had, and I found very compelling. A friend told me about it. It's called dynamic democracy. And the idea is that instead of every 4 years or so electing a politician to represent you on everything, you select people who you trust to represent you on the issues that they know best. So take that in for a second. Start thinking about the implications of that. So we no longer have elections. You know, there's no longer this circus that's happening right now with the Republican nomination. You simply figure out who you trust within a given issue, and you give them your decision-making power. And what this solves for, it solves for a lot of things. First of all, corruption. It's the biggest problem that we have right now in our government system. And a lot of people think that, well, we just need to take money out of politics. Well, it might help, but you're still dealing with the problem that these people still, you know, have to rely on the people around them for information, and we don't have access to those people. But if you can break it down to a very decentralized representative process, where you actually know the people the person who's representing you, and they're only representing you on the issues that they know best, then it solves for that problem. So this, this idea came to me through the course of a conversation, and I couldn't stop talking about it. I was talking with lots of people about it. I was like, okay, what is this? This is like, it's not direct democracy. It's kind of like direct democracy because we all have a vote on everything. And it's kind of like representative democracy because we have representation, but it's like, it's dynamic. It's dynamic democracy. So I typed in dynamic democracy into Google and found out that people were already working on this. And this started to become kind of, but it was very loosely organized. So I started kind of creating an organization around this, and very quickly ran into the problems of making decisions among lots of people. So we had about 100 people trying to figure out what to do within, how to move this organization forward. And we were coming up with plans for, you know, creating software that we could test out on college campuses and test them out in, you know, this sort of experimental method where we can see what works and see what doesn't, and then see if we can scale it up into cities and communities. But through that entire process, it became very difficult to see all of the various scenarios that were in front of us, all of the proposals, all of the interests. And that led me to realize that the key problem that needs to be solved for is, again, this maxing out of information. So I started working on a project called Sway. And Sway is piece of software that helps you map out the pieces, or the many pieces of a decision. Now think about the last time that you tried to make a decision among 20 people, 30 people, 40 people. It's usually either it's online or it's in a room like this. Now, if we're in a room together, oftentimes what happens is, we spend 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours talking in circles, right? And by the end of that 3 or 4 or 5 hours, we maybe have a better sense of why other people disagree with us or what the various proposals are on the table. But oftentimes, we need to compress all of that information into a very simplistic, like, oh, well, they must disagree with me because we don't share values. And at the end of the day, 3, 4 hours, 5 hours later, we're exhausted, and we vote from our gut, and we end up making bad decisions. The same is true in virtual decision-making processes. So you take, for example, was anyone following the decision-making process that Wikipedia went through when they were trying to decide if they were going to shut down Wikipedia for a day to protest SOPA? Was anyone following that at all? Okay. So if you went to Wikipedia during that time and you looked at the debate that was happening, it was literally, if you printed this thing out, it would have been like 50 or 60 pages of long conversation, right? And people bringing up points here, and then bringing up the same points down here, bringing up the same points down here. And if you went to that page and you just wanted to catch yourself up on where the decision-making process was, there was no way to do that. There was no map for the conversation. And so it's become very clear to me that this is something that we wrestle with in almost every aspect of our lives, at work, at home, in our communities, and its worst manifestation is at the governance level, because that's the largest scale that we try to make decisions. And so I want to bring this back around again to the core principle that I came to, which is that if we can increase our ability to compress information into a map that makes sense, then we can increase the functional democratic capacity of our communities and our organizations. And if we're able to do that, then we may be able to scale those processes to a thing like a city, state, or a country. So this was the birth of upgrade democracy, and we're a movement of people working toward this. I would love to talk with anyone who's interested in being involved in that. It's just it's getting formed right now. We're creating a Kickstarter campaign very soon to start building some of the first technology, which is, again, that technology called Sway for mapping out conversations. And the idea here is that if we can create a map for conversations around the question of what we should do, then we're solving a core human fundamental problem. Think about the problem that Wikipedia solved, right? The problem that Wikipedia solved is that there's this big question of what do we know? And they provided the technology that allowed lots of people to self-organize in an ad hoc manner on the question of what do we know. But there is yet to be a technology that really does that on what should we do. And so this is, it's bigger than democracy, it's bigger than politics. I think a lot of us are very, we're kind of done with thinking about politics. But what gets me up in the morning, why I want to work on this is because I deeply believe that people care. People care about the world. People want to make a difference. People care about the issues that politics affects. But we intuitively stay away from politics because it's so dirty, it's so broken, and it's not worthy of our participation. And if we can create a system that is worthy of our participation, that's a gift that we can give to the next generation. So that's I'm just sort of riffing here on a lot of the thoughts that are in my head on this issue. But this is this is a special event in that you have lots of, who considers themselves a systems thinker here, right? So this is an atypical crowd. So instead of me just coming up here and like talking about this issue, I'd like to just kind of, that was just sort of a provocation. And I'd like to engage in a conversation. So anything that I've said, if you have any thoughts about these, what is that? Is that 10 minutes? 7 minutes, cool, awesome. So that gives us some good time for conversation. So any thoughts you want to share just that come to mind? Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, so there are two, you said there are two problems. The size, yeah, uh-huh. Uh-huh. Sure.
We have a microphone here for people who want to make questions or talk.
Awesome, awesome. So I'll just repeat that really quickly. So the question, as I think I heard it, is that there are a few things going on, and